My name is Rachel Morrison, and I'm about to tell you something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Having a miscarriage at 17 weeks pregnant destroyed me in ways I didn't know a person could be destroyed. But what happened after what I discovered while I was bleeding and broken in my own bed changed everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my husband, and how far someone will go to control your life. While recovering from losing my baby, I found my husband's journal hidden in his office, and when I opened it, I read 5 words that made my blood run cold. He wrote, and I quote, knowing it would happen soon. He knew. He knew I was going to lose my baby. Before you think I'm crazy, before you think grief made me paranoid, just listen to my story because I have proof, and that proof sent my husband somewhere he'll be for the next 8 years. If this story shocks you, please hit that like button and subscribe because I'm sharing this to help other women recognize the signs I missed. And please, leave a comment telling me if you've ever felt like something was off in your relationship, but couldn't quite put your finger on it. Because I want you to know you're not alone. Let me take you back to the beginning. I met my husband David when I was 26. He was 32, successful, charming, and he pursued me like I was the only woman on earth. We got married after a year of dating, and honestly, the first 2 years were good. Or at least I thought they were. When I turned 29, I started talking about having a baby. David always said he wanted kids, that he couldn't wait to be a father, that he dreamed of having a family with me. But every time I brought up actually trying, he had a reason to wait. First, it was his job promotion. Then it was saving more money. Then it was wanting to buy a bigger house first. I went along with it because his reasons seemed valid and I trusted him. I loved him. I thought we were on the same team. Finally, when I was 31, I just stopped taking my birth control. I know some people will judge me for that, but I'd been waiting for 3 years and I was tired of the excuses. I got pregnant within 2 months. When I told David, his reaction was strange. He smiled. He hugged me. He said all the right things, but there was something in his eyes. Something that looked almost like panic. But it was so quick, so fleeting that I convinced myself I'd imagined it. I was pregnant, I was going to be a mom, and I pushed that weird feeling aside. The first trimester was rough. I had terrible morning sickness that lasted all day. I was exhausted constantly. David was attentive but distant, if that makes sense. He'd bring me crackers and ginger tea, but he never seemed excited. He never talked about baby names or nursery colors. He never put his hand on my belly. When I reached 12 weeks and we heard the heartbeat for the first time, I cried from joy. David just nodded and said that's good, like we'd gotten a decent report card. Not like we'd just heard our child's heart beating dot at 15 weeks. I started feeling better. The nausea faded and I got some energy back. I started planning the nursery, buying little things here and there, reading pregnancy books every night. David worked late most evenings during this time. He said he was trying to get ahead on projects so he could take paternity leave later, and that seemed reasonable. I was so focused on the baby that I didn't question it. I didn't question a lot of things I should have done at 16 weeks and 5 days. I started cramping. It was a Saturday morning. David had gone to the gym, and I was alone in the house when the pain started. At first, I thought it was just round ligament pain, something I'd write about, something normal. But it got worse. And then I started bleeding. I called David immediately, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. He didn't answer. I called 3 more times, nothing. I finally called an ambulance because the bleeding was getting heavier, and I was terrified and I couldn't drive myself. The paramedics were kind. The A staff were kind, but there was nothing anyone could do. By the time David finally showed up at the hospital, smelling like he'd just showered, my baby's heartbeat was gone. I was 17 weeks and 2 days pregnant. The doctor said sometimes these things just happen. that it was likely a chromosomal abnormality, that it wasn't my fault. I remember David holding my hand while the doctor talked, and I remember thinking his hand felt cold. Everything felt cold. They had to induce labor because I was too far along for a simple D&C. I had to deliver my tiny baby, my son, even though he'd already died inside me. That was the worst physical and emotional pain I've ever experienced. I labored for 14 hours to deliver a baby I'd never get to take home. David stayed with me, but he was on his phone a lot. He said he was updating family and handling work emails. I was too shattered to care. When it was finally over, when they took my baby away, I felt hollow, completely empty, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left just a shell. We went home 2 days later. My mom had wanted to come stay with us, but David said I needed rest and quiet, that too many people would stress me out. I was so numb, I just agreed. I spent the next week in bed, barely eating, crying until I had no tears left, staring at the ceiling. David took a few days off work, but then went back. He'd check on me, bring me food I didn't eat, but he never cried. Not once. He never talked about the baby. When I tried to talk about what we'd lost, what we could name him, maybe having a small memorial, David would say I needed to focus on healing and moving forward. He said dwelling on it wasn't healthy. Something in me started to shift. Even through the grief, I started noticing things, like how relieved David seemed, how he'd quickly packed up the few baby items I'd bought while I was in the hospital, hiding them away so I wouldn't see them, how he never asked me how I was really feeling, how he seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted about 2 weeks after the miscarriage. I was physically recovered enough to move around the house more. I was still devastated, still grieving, but I couldn't stay in bed forever. David was at work, and I found myself standing outside his home office. He usually kept it locked, said he had important work documents and client information that needed to be secure. But that day, the door was unlocked. I don't even know why I went in. Maybe some part of me already knew something was wrong. His office was neat and organized, very typical David. I sat in his chair and I just looked around, feeling lost. Then I noticed his desk drawer was slightly open, the one he usually kept locked. Inside were some files, some old tax documents, and a leather journal I'd never seen before. I picked it up. The rational part of my brain said put it down, respect his privacy. But the part of me that had noticed his cold hand and his relief and his strange behavior, that part made me open it. The first few pages were normal. Work notes, meeting reminders, nothing interesting. Then I got to an entry from 8 months ago, right around when I secretly stopped my birth control. He'd written about noticing I seemed different, suspecting I might be trying to get pregnant without telling him. He wrote that he needed to be careful, that he wasn't ready for kids and might never be. My heart started pounding. I flipped forward to entries from when I got pregnant. He'd written about how angry he was that I'd trapped him. Those were his words, trapped him. He wrote about researching options, about how far along a pregnancy could be terminated, about adoption. Then I found the entry that changed everything. It was dated 2 weeks before my miscarriage. He wrote about how he'd been reading online, on forums I don't even want to name, about natural ways to induce miscarriage. He listed herbs, specific herbs. Donkey, Kohosh, P-E-N-N-Y-R-L. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the journal. I kept reading, even though every word felt like a knife. He wrote about how he'd been making me special herbal teas to help with my nausea, how I trusted him completely, how I drank everything he gave me because I thought he was being sweet and supportive. He wrote knowing it would happen soon at the end of that entry. 4 days later, I had my miscarriage. I sat in that office and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process what I was reading. My husband, the man I loved, the man I married, had poisoned me, had killed our baby. had watched me labor to deliver our dead son knowing he had caused it. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Then I locked myself in our bedroom and I read that entire journal front to back. There was more. So much more. He'd never wanted children. He'd lied from the beginning. He married me because I was successful and attractive and made him look good, his words. He'd planned to stay married but childless, and when I started pushing for a baby, he panicked. The journal detailed his manipulation, how he put off trying for years, how angry he was when I got pregnant anyway. And the worst part, the part that made me want to scream, was an entry after the miscarriage where he wrote about how relieved he was, how everything was back to normal, how I'd probably be too scared to try again anytime soon. I hit my lowest point right there on my bedroom floor, clutching that journal. The baby I'd loved, the child I'd already imagined growing up, learning to walk, going to kindergarten, that baby had been murdered by his own father. And I'd trusted the man who did it. I'd let him comfort me while I grieved the loss he caused. I felt stupid and violated, and so angry I couldn't see straight. But then something inside me hardened. I'd spent 2 weeks being a victim, being destroyed, being helpless. I was done with that. If David thought he could do this and get away with it, he was wrong. I took pictures of every single page of that journal with my phone. Then I put it back exactly where I found it. I didn't confront David when he got home that night. I acted normal, or as normal as a grieving woman could act. I needed to be smart about this. The next morning, after David left for work, I called my doctor's office. I told them I was having some concerning symptoms and needed to come in. When I got there, I asked to speak to my OB privately. I showed her the journal photos. I watched her face go pale as she read. She told me that certain herbs in high doses can absolutely cause miscarriage, and that this was not only unethical but criminal. She asked if I wanted to report it. I said yes. She helped me contact the police. I filed a report that same day. The detective I spoke with was a woman named Sarah Chen, and she took me seriously immediately. She explained that what David had done could be considered several crimes, including assault and potentially manslaughter, depending on the state laws and what could be proven. They need to investigate, need to get the journal, need evidence. I told her I had pictures, but that the journal was still in his desk. We made a plan. The hardest part was continuing to act normal around David while the investigation happened. Detective Chen got a warrant for his journal and his computer. She found search history he deleted, but that tech forensics recovered. Websites about inducing miscarriage. Forums where he'd ask questions under fake usernames. Orders for bulk herbs from suspicious online retailers. They even found the herbal tea bags he'd used still in our pantry. Custom blends he'd ordered that were loaded with abortifacient herbs at dangerous doses. I moved out while the investigation was ongoing, stayed with my mom, and finally told her everything. She was horrified and furious and held me while I cried. My dad wanted to confront David himself, but I begged him not to let the law handle it. David tried calling me, texting me, asking what was wrong, where I was. I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him panic. 3 weeks after I found that journal, the police arrested David at his office. He was charged with assault, reckless endangerment, and administering poison with intent to cause miscarriage. That last one is an actual law in our state that I didn't even know existed. His bail was set high, and his parents had to mortgage their house to pay it. When the case went to trial 8 months later, I had to testify. I had to sit on that stand and describe my miscarriage in detail while David stared at me from the defense table. His lawyer tried to argue that the journal was just dark thoughts, not actions, that there was no proof I actually drank the teas or that they caused the miscarriage. But the prosecution had the receipts for the herbs. the search history, his own written confession in the journal, and testimony from my doctor about the specific herbs found in the tea bags and their known effects. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts, David was sentenced to 8 years in prison. When the judge read the sentence, I watched him break down crying, begging for mercy, saying he'd made a mistake. The same man who'd never shed a tear for our dead baby was sobbing for himself. The judge, a woman in her 60s, looked at him with pure disgust and said that he'd killed his own child to avoid responsibility and showed no remorse until facing consequences. She said he was a danger and a coward. I felt vindicated in a way I didn't know I needed. I divorced him while he was awaiting sentencing. He didn't contest it. I got everything, the house, the savings, all of it. His family tried to contact me to tell me I was ruining his life, that I was vindictive. I blocked them all. My life had already been ruined when I delivered my dead baby. David ruined his own life with his choices. It's been 2 years since the sentencing. I'm 34 now. I've been in therapy consistently, working through the trauma and the betrayal and the grief. I've learned that I wasn't stupid for trusting my husband. I was normal. He was the monster. I've learned that my baby's death wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have known, that some people are just evil in ways we can't predict. I've also learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. I survived something that should have broken me forever, and instead I fought back. I'm not sure if I'll ever try to have another baby. That's something I'm still working through in therapy. The idea of pregnancy is tied to so much trauma now. But I'm dating someone new, someone kind who knows my whole story and thinks I'm brave for surviving it. Maybe one day I'll be ready. Or maybe I won't, and that's okay too. My worth isn't tied to being a mother. Even though I wanted it so badly, I'm sharing this story because I want other women to know that if something feels off in your relationship, trust that feeling. If your partner seems relieved instead of sad about your pregnancy loss, pay attention. If someone is controlling your medical care, your food, your drinks, that's not normal concern, that's control. I missed so many red flags because I loved David and trusted him. I thought marriage meant assuming the best about your partner, but real love doesn't manipulate. Real partnership doesn't involve control and deception. The lesson I learned from this nightmare is that you have to trust yourself more than you trust anyone else. Your instincts exist for a reason. That weird feeling I had when David first reacted to my pregnancy news, I should have explored that instead of dismissing it. I'm not saying become paranoid or suspicious of everyone, but I'm saying that you know when something isn't right. Listen to that voice. And if something terrible happens to you, if someone hurts you in an unthinkable way, you have the right to fight back. You don't have to stay silent. You don't have to protect someone who destroyed you. I could have kept David's secret, could have just divorced him quietly and moved on. But he deserved to face consequences, and my baby deserved justice. Even if he never got to take a breath in this world, I think about my son sometimes, about who he would have been. I named him after everything was over after the trial. I named him Thomas after my grandfather. I have a small memorial for him in my garden, a stone with his name and the dates. 17 weeks wasn't very long, but he was real to me. He was wanted and loved, at least by me, and he mattered. His short existence meant something because it revealed the truth about the man I married and gave me the strength to make sure that man could never hurt anyone else this way. So now I want to ask you something. And I really want you to answer in the comments because your story might help someone else who's reading. Have you ever discovered something about your partner that completely changed how you saw them? Have you ever had to choose between staying silent and fighting for justice? What did you do, and do you regret your choice? Tell me your story because we healed together, And someone reading this right now might need to hear that they're not alone.